In the remote village of Ravenwood, nestled deep within the shadowy woods, a sense of foreboding hung heavy in the air. The villagers had long whispered about the cursed blood moon that appeared once every century, a harbinger of unspeakable horrors. This year, the blood moon would rise again. Lena, a curious and headstrong young woman, lived on the outskirts of the village. Unlike the others, she was fascinated by the legends and refused to be cowed by fear. Determined to uncover the truth, she spent her days researching ancient texts and her nights exploring the dense forest. One evening, as the blood moon loomed large and crimson in the sky, Lena ventured deeper into the woods than ever before. The air grew colder, and an unnatural silence enveloped the forest. Her heart pounded as she stumbled upon a hidden, decrepit mansion, covered in ivy and decay. Despite the palpable sense of dread, Lena pushed open the heavy, creaking door and stepped inside. The interior was shrouded in darkness, but the faint light of the blood moon filtered through the broken windows, casting eerie shadows on the walls. As she moved through the hallways, Lena discovered ancient paintings of a family with eyes that seemed to follow her every move. In the largest painting, a strikingly handsome man with piercing eyes stood at the center. His gaze sent chills down her spine. Suddenly, she heard a soft whisper, almost like a sigh. Following the sound, she found herself in a grand ballroom, where a solitary figure stood by the window, bathed in the moon's crimson glow. It was the man from the painting, unchanged by time. "Who are you?" Lena demanded, her voice trembling. "I am Adrian," he replied, turning to face her. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light. "And you, my dear, have trespassed on cursed ground." Lena felt an inexplicable pull toward Adrian, unable to tear her gaze away. He moved with inhuman speed, and before she could react, he was standing inches from her. She felt his cold breath on her neck. "I have waited a century for this night," Adrian whispered, his voice a blend of seduction and menace. "For the blood moon grants me the power to reclaim my strength and quench my thirst." Realization dawned on Lena, but it was too late. Adrian's fangs pierced her neck, and she felt her life force draining away. She tried to scream, but no sound emerged. The world around her faded to black. When Lena awoke, she was no longer in the mansion, but back in her village. The sun was rising, and she felt an unbearable hunger gnawing at her. She stumbled into her home, where her family rushed to her side, relieved and concerned. But Lena was not the same. The curse had claimed her. That night, as the blood moon reached its zenith, she succumbed to the monstrous thirst within her. The village of Ravenwood was plunged into chaos as the new vampire tore through her loved ones, her humanity lost forever. By dawn, Ravenwood was a ghost town, its inhabitants either fled or fallen. The cursed mansion stood silent once more, waiting patiently for the next blood moon and the horrors it would bring. In the heart of Transylvania, an ancient castle stood atop a rocky crag, shrouded in mist and legend. The villagers spoke in hushed tones about its enigmatic owner, Count Victor Dragomir, a reclusive nobleman whose ancestry was said to be steeped in darkness. Many believed the Count to be a vampire, but no one dared to approach the castle to confirm their fears. Elena, a young historian with a thirst for adventure, was captivated by the tales of Count Dragomir. Ignoring the villagers' warnings, she set out to uncover the truth behind the legend. With a heavy cloak wrapped around her and a lantern in hand, she made her way to the castle under the light of a full moon. The castle gates creaked open with an eerie groan, as if welcoming her into its depths. Elena stepped inside, her footsteps echoing through the vast, empty halls. The air was thick with the scent of decay and ancient secrets. She made her way to the grand staircase, its banister carved with intricate designs of serpents and bats. At the top of the stairs, a door swung open, revealing a dimly lit study. Seated at a grand desk was Count Dragomir, his pale face illuminated by the flickering candlelight. His eyes, deep and piercing, locked onto Elena with an intensity that made her shiver. "Welcome, my dear," the Count said in a voice as smooth as silk. "I have been expecting you." Elena's heart pounded in her chest. "You know why I'm here," she said, trying to steady her voice. "I want to know the truth about you." Count Dragomir rose from his chair, his movements fluid and graceful. "The truth, you say? It is a dangerous thing to seek, but since you have come all this way, I shall oblige." He gestured for her to follow him. They descended into the bowels of the castle, where the air grew colder and the shadows deeper. At the end of a long, dark corridor, the Count opened a heavy door, revealing a chamber lined with coffins. The stench of death was overpowering. "Behold," the Count said, "the resting place of my ancestors. Like me, they are bound to the night, sustained by the blood of the living." Elena recoiled in horror. "You are a monster," she whispered. Count Dragomir smiled, his fangs glinting in the candlelight. "Yes, a monster created by the curse of immortality. And now, my dear Elena, you will join us." Before she could react, he was upon her, his strength overwhelming. Elena struggled, but the Count's grip was unbreakable. She felt his fangs pierce her neck, the pain sharp and cold. Her vision blurred as her life force ebbed away. When Elena awoke, she was lying in one of the coffins, the lid slightly ajar. She felt a gnawing hunger, unlike anything she had ever experienced. The transformation was complete. She was now one of the undead. Despair washed over her as she realized her fate. She was trapped in the castle, bound to Count Dragomir's will. The villagers, sensing her disappearance, would come to investigate. They would meet the same grisly end, their blood feeding the eternal hunger of the vampires within. The castle remained a place of terror, its walls echoing with the cries of the damned. Count Dragomir had found his new bride, and together they would reign over the night, their legacy of horror stretching into eternity. In the desolate town of Black Hollow, nestled in the mountains and perpetually shrouded in fog, there was an old, abandoned church. The townsfolk avoided it at all costs, believing it to be cursed. They spoke of strange noises emanating from the crypt beneath the church, whispers of a creature that preyed upon the living. Nathan, a skeptical journalist with a penchant for debunking myths, arrived in Black Hollow determined to uncover the truth behind the eerie tales. Armed with a camera and a flashlight, he set out for the church one gloomy evening. The townsfolk watched him go with a mix of pity and fear, knowing he might not return. The church loomed before him, its spire silhouetted against the darkening sky. Nathan pushed open the heavy, rotting door, and it creaked ominously. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. Broken pews and shattered stained glass windows added to the sense of abandonment. Undeterred, Nathan made his way to the entrance of the crypt. The stone steps leading down into the crypt were slippery with moss and age. As Nathan descended, the air grew colder, and the darkness pressed in around him. He switched on his flashlight, its beam piercing the blackness. The crypt was a maze of narrow passageways and ancient tombs, each one marked with the names of long-forgotten souls. Nathan's heart pounded as he explored deeper into the crypt. Suddenly, his flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. He heard a faint, haunting melody echoing through the corridors, drawing him toward its source. Following the sound, he stumbled upon a large, ornate coffin in the center of a dimly lit chamber. Curiosity getting the better of him, Nathan approached the coffin. As he reached out to touch it, the lid slowly began to open on its own. He stepped back, his breath caught in his throat. From within the coffin, a figure rose, a tall, gaunt man with deathly pale skin and eyes that glowed like embers. "I have waited for you," the figure intoned, his voice resonating with ancient power. "I am Lucian, guardian of the crypt, and you have trespassed on sacred ground." Nathan tried to flee, but his legs felt like lead. Lucian moved with preternatural speed, blocking his escape. "You seek the truth, do you not?" Lucian whispered, his breath cold against Nathan's skin. "Then you shall have it, but at a price." Lucian's eyes bore into Nathan's soul, and he felt an overwhelming compulsion to obey. "Kneel," Lucian commanded, and Nathan dropped to his knees. The vampire lord leaned in, his fangs bared. Nathan's scream echoed through the crypt as Lucian sank his teeth into his neck. The pain was excruciating, but it quickly gave way to a strange euphoria. Nathan's vision blurred, and he felt his life slipping away, replaced by something dark and insatiable. When he awoke, he was lying in the coffin, Lucian standing over him. "Welcome to your new existence," Lucian said. "You are now bound to this crypt as I am. Together, we will guard its secrets and feed on those foolish enough to seek them." Nathan's heart, now still and cold, filled with dread. He could feel the hunger gnawing at him, a need for blood that would never be sated. As the first light of dawn seeped into the crypt, Nathan knew he was forever changed, cursed to an eternity of darkness and thirst. Black Hollow remained a place of fear and mystery. The church, and the crypt beneath it, stood as a silent sentinel over the town, a reminder of the horrors that lay within. Those who dared to venture too close never returned, their fate sealed by the vampire guardians of the Crypt of Shadows. In the isolated village of Drearwood, surrounded by dense, foreboding forests, there stood a mansion that had been abandoned for centuries. The villagers believed it to be haunted, a place where no light dared to shine. They spoke of a sinister presence that inhabited the mansion, preying on anyone who dared to enter. Isabella, a fearless adventurer with a love for the supernatural, arrived in Drearwood intrigued by the legends. She had heard tales of the mansion and its dark history, and her curiosity got the better of her. Ignoring the villagers' warnings, she decided to explore the mansion and uncover its secrets. On a stormy night, Isabella made her way to the mansion, its silhouette looming against the lightning-filled sky. She pushed open the heavy iron gates, which screeched in protest. As she approached the mansion, the air grew colder, and the wind howled through the broken windows. The door creaked open, revealing a grand foyer covered in dust and cobwebs. The air was thick with the scent of decay. Isabella's footsteps echoed as she moved deeper into the mansion. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow her every move. As she explored the mansion, she found a sealed envelope on an ornate table. It was addressed to her, despite her having just arrived. Her hands trembled as she opened it and read the elegant, flowing script. "Welcome, Isabella. We have been expecting you. Join us for dinner in the grand dining hall." The invitation was unsettling, but Isabella's curiosity was insatiable. She followed the dimly lit corridor to the grand dining hall. The room was lavishly decorated, with a long table set for a feast. At the head of the table sat a man with strikingly handsome features, his eyes a deep, unnatural crimson. "Good evening, Isabella," he said smoothly, rising to greet her. "I am Lord Alaric. Please, have a seat." Isabella hesitated, but felt an inexplicable pull toward him. She sat down, and the feast began. The food was sumptuous, and the wine flowed freely. Yet, There was an underlying tension in the air, a sense of impending doom. As the evening progressed, Isabella noticed that the other guests were unnaturally pale, their movements too graceful, their eyes glowing faintly in the candlelight. Realization dawned on her. She was dining with vampires. Lord Alaric smiled, as if reading her thoughts. "You are a brave soul, Isabella, to venture into the unknown. But bravery alone will not save you." Before she could react, Alaric was at her side, his cold hand gripping her wrist. "You have entered our domain, and now you shall join us in eternity." Panic surged through Isabella, but she was powerless to resist. Alaric's fangs sank into her neck, and she felt her life draining away, replaced by a cold, dark hunger. The transformation was swift and agonizing. When Isabella awoke, she was in a lavish bedroom, the moonlight streaming through the window. She felt an insatiable thirst, a craving for blood that consumed her every thought. Alaric stood by the window, watching her. "Welcome to your new life, Isabella," he said softly. "You are one of us now, bound to the night and the hunger." Despair engulfed her as she realized her fate. She was trapped in the mansion, a prisoner of her own dark desires. The villagers of Drearwood would continue to whisper of the haunted mansion and its cursed inhabitants, never knowing the true horror that lurked within. Isabella, now a creature of the night, prowled the dark corridors of the mansion, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to venture into her domain. The cycle of terror continued, a never-ending nightmare in the heart of Drearwood.